a package version property, we will still specify the NuGet package and the version that we want to reference. And what this allows us to do back inside of our API project is omit the specific version, and now I can only reference the package by the name. And this will make managing your NuGet packages and your .NET versions much simpler. All you have to do when you want to update a package version is update it in one place. This is your directory packages props file, and then it will be picked up by all of the projects in your solution. The second thing it allows you to do is to easily upgrade or downgrade the target framework that you want to be using. Let's say I want to use .NET 8, all I have to do is update the target framework in the directory build props to target .NET 8. Of course, I would need to downgrade some NuGet packages that cannot run using .NET 8, but the migration process isn't too complicated. However, let's revert this to .NET 9 because that's what I want to be using. Now, in the end of this project, I will share the complete source code that's targeting both .NET 8 and .NET 9, so you can pick and choose whichever one suits your use case. So let's continue with our setup. One more thing I want to introduce inside of my directory build props are some settings that relate to enforcing code quality. So what I want to do is to introduce Sonar Analyzer C#. This is a NuGet package with some static code analyzers into all of the projects in my current solution, except projects that end with this extension, which is the Docker Compose startup file. However, this is just a package reference. We are missing the package version, and we should specify this inside of the directory packages props file. Now, in order for this to work, I will temporarily comment this out, and then let's go ahead and look for NuGet packages on the solution level. I will look for Sonar Analyzer C#, and at the time of recording this video, this will be the latest version. So I can go ahead and pick the project where I want to install this. It's just the one project that I have, and then let's click install. And then let's take a look at what happened. If I go into the directory packages props file, you will see that I have a reference to the package version of the Sonar Analyzer C# package with the specific version representing the latest version. And then inside of my dev habit API project, I have a package reference without mentioning the version. Now I will omit this, and now I can uncomment the setup that I have in the directory build props file because it will make it easier if I want to split my one project into multiple projects in the same solution, and all of them will have the Sonar Analyzer C# NuGet package applied. Now you can confirm this by right-clicking on the dependencies on your API project and saying Manage NuGet Packages. And if you take a look at what's installed, we have Microsoft ASP.NET Core OpenAPI, as well as the Sonar Analyzer C# NuGet package. So this is working as expected. Let's go ahead and close down the directory build props file, the dev habit OpenAPI project, as well as the packages props file, the NuGet solution, and then let's go back to the warnings that we were seeing on our controller. There is a way to configure this, as well as some other code style rules through an editor config file. I'm going to right-click the solution items. You can try clicking new editor config, but for some reason this isn't working for me, so I will create this file manually. So let's say dot and then editor config, and you should see something like this. Now if you run into any hiccups along the way, you can grab all of these files right below this video, download them, and just add them to your Visual Studio solution. You can also download the complete source code for this lesson if you don't want to set this up yourself. Now back to the editor config file. Here you can set up some code style rules for your .NET projects, as well as some rules for your static code analysis. This is the part starting from this line and then going down to the end of the file. I find static code analysis very useful for enforcing code quality across my projects, but it can also be cumbersome with some pretty pointless rules that I don't think are worth following. So I went ahead and turned off some of the rules that I don't think are valuable, and that should make building our solution somewhat simpler. For example, you can see that the warning for the weather forecast controller being public is now gone, so that's already making some progress. Now we have another warning that we aren't using the logger. So you can either solve this by removing it or writing some log statement. For example, we can say fetching weather forecast. So let's say I try to build my solution now. I get another set of warnings that I can easily fix this time. Let's say I use await run async here instead of the synchronous versions. And because I prefer using the specific type instead of var when it's not evident from the right-hand side, I'm going to update these two var statements. And then another error that we have is converting this into a file scope namespace. And finally, I should be able to build the DebHabit API project, and our build is succeeding. Next, let's go ahead and add a Docker file into our project. So I can right-click on the project, say add Docker support, and I can choose how I want to build my container. This can be either the .NET SDK or the Docker file. I will choose the Docker file, targeting the Linux operating system, and this is the file that will be scaffolded for me. So I'm going to leave this as is. It's a multi-stage build file targeting the ASP.NET Core base image, and this is the actual image that we will be running when we start our container, but we will use the .NET 9 SDK to build our project, publish it, before finally running it in the end. Now, after setting up my Docker file, I also want to enable container orchestration support, and I will use Docker Compose for this. So I can say add container orchestrator support, and I will add a Docker Compose project. You may get a prompt that your Docker file already exists. I'm going to choose not to override it, and this should scaffold the Docker Compose project. If I open up the Docker Compose YAML file, you can see I have my one service, which is the DebHabit API, and is targeting the existing Docker file that I have. Now, if you were paying attention in the Docker file, you will notice that it exposes the ports 8080 and 8081. In the Docker Compose override file, you will also see these ports exposed. So what I like to do is to expose the ports that I already set up in the launch settings JSON. And these are the ports 5000, and this matches the port 8080. And then I will also expose the port 5001, which is the HTTPS port, and I will map it to the 8081 port inside of my Docker container. So now Docker Compose is set up as my startup project, and I should be able to run it and start my API. I'm going to assume that this is just working as expected and move on to the next thing I want to set up, which is support for observability using OpenTelemetry. If we get this out of the way right now, it's going to make it easier for us to continue developing our REST API, so consider it just one of the building blocks for our foundation. Now, if I look for OpenTelemetry packages, and I will include some pre-release packages, here's what I need to install. I need OpenTelemetry extensions hosting, so I'm going to go ahead and install that. I will install the HTTP instrumentation, as well as the OpenTelemetry exporter OpenTelemetry protocol, which will allow me to export my distributed traces and metrics. I will also install the ASP.NET Core instrumentation, so let's go ahead and add that. And I will also install the runtime instrumentation, so let's go ahead and install that. Now, if I take a look at the API project, you can see I just have package references for the OpenTelemetry packages, and all of the package versions are correctly specified in the directory packages props file. If you want to start adding some structure here, you can introduce some comments. For example, here I can say OpenTelemetry, and this could be an easy way for me to make a couple of sections in the directory packages props file, and this will make it easier to group NuGet packages based on related functionalities. So let's close this down, as well as this and this, and then let's go into the program file to set up what we need for OpenTelemetry. So I will say builder services, add OpenTelemetry, and then I want to chain a call to configure resource. And on the resource that I'm configuring, I want to add a service, and the service name is going to be builder environment application name. Then I want to set up my distributed tracing, so I will say with tracing, and then let's configure the tracer builder provider. The NuGet packages that we install give us a few extension methods, so I can set up HTTP client instrumentation, and I can also set up ASP.NET Core instrumentation. Let me just fix the alignment here so that it's easier to track these calls. Then let's set up our metrics, and we're going to do this in a similar fashion. So I'm going to say metrics, and then what instrumentation do we have? We also have HTTP client instrumentation. we have ASP.NET Core instrumentation, and we also have runtime instrumentation. And this is going to automatically set up OpenTelemetry and start exporting some traces and metrics using the OpenTelemetry exporter. Now I'm going to also chain a call to use OTLP exporter. This will set up a global exporter for my OpenTelemetry data, and this covers tracing and metrics. But I can also set up logging. If I say builder services logging at OpenTelemetry, this allows me to configure some options for my logging setup. And let's say I want to include scopes. By default, this